so we got a couple people in here already.
Hey everybody.
All right, so thank you so much. My name's Tommy Runs from Chip Time Running. Welcome to and thank you for watching the first episode of the Run, Eat, Sleep show. We're a show that will be talking about exactly that: running, eating, sleeping, and then we'll repeat every week. We'll talk about the importance of training and different things like that, and hopefully we'll get to be able to talk about some equipment and all that good stuff. And then on the Eat Day, we'll be talking about diet, nutrition, and all the great things that come along with that to make sure that you can stay healthy in your process of training and all that good stuff. And the sleep part is so important, you know?
Yeah.
And not just like the sleeping, like literally go to sleep. I mean, obviously you need some good sleep at night, but then the recovery process. And what can we do, you know, before, you know, maybe not during, but before and after our runs to make sure that we can like have a healthy life in running, you know, because a runner's life can be pretty strenuous.
Mm-hmm.
I learned the hard way recently that recovery is very important. So run, eat, sleep, and repeat. We'll do that, and thank you so much. Today we have a legend, and I just wanted to, I'm really happy that I get to have a friend be on the show, the first one. This is the first episode, and we're going to be talking about running. And I have Justin Craig here, the co-owner of RUNdetroit, where we are. This is not my house, and these are not all my shoes. So I really do appreciate you having me here, and thank you so much for hosting the show.
Yeah, no problem. I'm glad we could have you. Someday, I expect to see a shoe wall. Like, we're going to walk into your master closet. It's going to be like cribs. Open it up. Just, you know, lights.
I wouldn't mind that. So what I just heard was you said you're going to give me a bunch of shoes. Is that what we're going to do? Okay,
yeah.
So
I think it's like 100 pairs a year.
Yeah, now I just got sponsored by RUNdetroit, and I'm happy. So thank you so much. End the show. But I just wanted to I guess just jump in. We'll talk about kind of start from the beginning a little bit. Like, when did you start running? Let's talk about your journey, because if people don't know, I mean, everybody in this area knows you. But if they don't, you are a very fast runner, and elite runner is elite pro, right?
Yeah, we'll call it like a sub-elite.
Okay, so sub-elite level, which means much faster than me. So let's just talk about where'd you start your journey, your running journey, and kind of how it progressed and where we are now.
So I'll start by saying I just turned 40, and I think I found that like my running started like a lot of other people that I've met recently that are like 40-year-old runners that are like holding their own.
Right.
I did not grow up running. Kind of thinking about it, like knowing that we were going to talk about this today, like I would normally say, like I started running in my mid-20s. I was a competitive cyclist and had a group that I rode with and had a lot of fun, and actually had a lot of interest in a lady who was also in that group. And the only way to spend more time with her was to run. And I did everything, especially when it comes to the train side, that you should not do. In order to spend more time with her, she said, "Do you want to run a marathon?" I said yes. The marathon was in 6 weeks, so we bought a pair of shoes, my very first pair of running shoes ever. In hindsight, learned a lot about how not to buy a pair of running shoes and a lot of the flaws of like the biomechanics and the things that go into when a new runner typically buys a running shoe. Mm-hmm. And I ran for 2 weeks, probably throwing down like 70 miles per week.
I mean, because you had the aerobic base though, from cycling.
Cardio was there. That was not a problem.
Well, it's like, wait a minute.
These guys could not hold up. So I had stress fractures in both tibias, and I did not run for the next 4 weeks. But the race was up in Victoria, BC. I was living in Seattle at the time. Already had ferry tickets booked, already had hotel room booked, and so went up and did a little shakeout, like 3 miles the night before the race. Mm-hmm. My legs didn't hurt, so we started the race. I finished, and especially from probably mile 16 on, like my hips started to tighten up. There was a lot more tears than you would want to have in a new relationship. But she ran with me the whole time.
Yeah, the goal is to not cry.
Yeah, the goal is to not cry, but yeah.
So your first date was 26.2.
I wasn't as a first date.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So you got the girl before the race. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm glad at least we got that.
And she didn't dump me right after the race, even though I definitely cried during the race.
Okay, good. Well, she's a good one there.
Yeah. But I did not run for about a year afterwards.
Just because it was
my legs were just destroyed. immediately after for a couple weeks, I couldn't walk through a grocery store without like actual pain. Like holding onto the cart just to take the weight off. Yeah. So don't do that. It was stupid.
I don't think anybody watching this would think to do something like that.
I'm
surprised that that's your story. I thought it was going to be much better than that. Like, that's crazy. Like, for somebody that, like, to get to your level, too, at this point.
Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes.
You know?
Recently, I listen to a lot of books while I'm, like, doing projects, whether it's on the house or the car or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the David Goggins book, like, Can't Kill Me.
Oh, yeah.
And like, I just kept thinking about it, like, you are such an idiot. Like, yeah, here he is, like, just jump into a 50K just because.
Yeah. With all, like, feet broken, legs broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to duct tape myself, but I was,
close.
Like, here's like Goggins idiot, and there's like just an idiot. So.
Yeah, and Goggins idiot is way up there.
Yeah.
But he's a very inspirational idiot, though.
He is, the guy, for sure.
Yeah. I've run some pretty hard miles after reading that book, but. So what was that finish time? The first one?
I think it was like 4:18.
4:18. So first marathon 4:18, and then fast forward. What is your marathon PR?
So it's actually not that fast. So like when you throw down like words like elite, like I don't really keep track of the like PRs and whatnot. I think my fastest official marathon is like 2:44, 2:43 and change.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's like, I've always thought it's like on race day, I've just made so many mistakes, even though sometimes I know what I'm not supposed to do, that I've done everything wrong. And I feel like the last like 4 marathons, I've actually done things right. And I'm just like, I raced last weekend, or not yesterday, but 8 days ago.
The virtual free press?
Sort of. It was a physical race put on with like timing clocks, and there was like 8 marathoners. But it was set up with elite water tables and whatnot, so we had our own fuel. And with very minimal training, I was very consistent. I ran at 2:49. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I saw that. I'm like, he's just casually over here running 2:49s now. I'm like, okay, one of these days.
Yeah. So I'm pretty stoked. I've got some goals, and then. Indy was pretty much the same thing, like 5 weeks of training, and I ran at 2:40. I have a watch time of like 2:48 and change.
Okay.
So I feel like
Indy was that 2019? You said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so it's kind of been a catalyst or a jumping off point, knowing like, all right, I did basically as little training as possible going into this. If I actually just run smart instead of what I was trying to do before, is like mimicking what you typically see elite athletes doing. And breaking every time.
Yeah, so like that, I guess that was, I definitely wanted to talk about like training segments, So yeah, I mean, you kind of segued into that perfectly. So what did when you were saying doing it wrong, like what did your training segment look like? What were your goals like per week and things like that?
So, I guess like back in the day, I was typically trying to follow a rather elite program, if you will. So, 80 to 110 miles per week would be the typical goal. I worked a pretty demanding career in medicine, and so for me, I was able to maintain that higher mileage and didn't get injured as often as I should, because I was often doing 2-a-days. So depending on which house we were coming from, it was most likely going to be about 7 miles. So I get 7 miles in the morning, work a long day, run 7 miles home. If I needed to extend it, I can take the long way home. I might get 14 in the evening. So I was getting a lot of, 15 to 20 mile days, but breaking that up. And a lot of speed work. Seattle is just a very hilly place, so I got a lot of hills just naturally, but really like just trying to hit it hard all the time. And most of the time, like getting much beyond 80, things would start to creep up. And
I'd imagine 80 miles a week, things will start to happen.
But also it's like 80 miles a week and not taking care of my body. I had, sort of ran semi-successfully, and with some time I found out that I really loved the ultra marathon, specifically the 50K, and I excelled at it. they're often like in the Northwest, very hilly, somewhat challenging courses. And so that ended up becoming my race of choice for many years. But I still trained exclusively in the city, on the roads, and maybe go pre-run a course, but that was about the extent of the trail. With some time and moving here to the city almost 8 years ago, I started to train a little bit differently. There was this coach that I stumbled upon. He doesn't have any books. It's like this little bits of information that you can pull from blogs, and maybe there's an article or there's a screenshot that somebody posted from a conference that they went to. But his name is Roberto Konova, and he has this saying is, what does a long, slow run do to train you for a long, fast run? And that really hit for me. Like, the standard, like, Lydiard and very Western method is, maybe a lot of miles and really doing, like, taking the intensity down. And I think that works for a lot of people. But for me, the Konova method seemed to work well, at least the theory. And the other thing was, he had everything based off of a goal. And I love that. Like, you show up and you say, I want to run 3 hours for the marathon. Well, we can reverse engineer that. We know what your goal, your pace has to be.
Train based on that,
and so that becomes 100% effort. And so today, you and I are going to go out, we're going to go do a run. Well, we're going to go do it at 78% effort. But you're doing 78, I'm doing 78. Maybe your goal's 3, mine might be 250. But we're still doing 78% of our goal. And then everything is geared around getting you accustomed to that pace.
So you said that's the Konova method? Right. So that's more of like high intensity. Not necessarily high intensity, but much different than some of the other methods that require you to or ask of you to do a lot of like more easy runs and under and aerobic type speeds.
I would say overall the intensity is a little bit higher.
But not anybody crazy.
Well,
it is.
So for anybody who's thinking like, oh, I want to go look that up and I want to use that for my next marathon, for the Konova program that I was able to reverse engineer, because there are a couple PDFs out there that show some of his athletes, and I think it was Moses Mosef. It basically had his entire build-up for Berlin, like 2016. His debut marathon, he ran a 2:04 and change. So week 1 of that Konova method with the pace that I was running. So a lot of it's time. So say go run 78% for 90 minutes today. And for me, week 1 of the program is 83 miles. So if you're not comfortable like on week 1 jumping into like 80 miles, like, it would be good if you're, nerdy and you want to just take in more information to like look him up. Cool guy, cool concepts. But so you really have to like do some adaptations for like most of our runners that are running like 30 miles a week or maybe maxing out at 60 top.
Because like through my journey of, because the program that I was on was some similar to that, because it picked, you base everything off of the time that you'd like to get to, but then also you base that time of what you're going to shoot for based on what you've already done. So like I guess what there's a lot of the runners out here that are let's just say like you're running a 350, 350 marathons, your PR, and say you want to get to a 330. Is that like a 20 minutes? To rent normal people doesn't really seem that much, but having going out there running a PR of 20 minutes in a marathon is huge. What would your advice be to someone that just says like I'm at a 350 or a 4-hour marathon and I want to get faster as fast as possible, healthy, because you can't look up any program and then just say I want to do that one and I want to do 330 and then just start running, because like you said, your body has to do some adaptations you have to have and some work you got to put in to be able to jump into any program, right? So like what would you suggest somebody would do to get faster in that situation?
Well, the first 2 things I would say that probably top priority is first have a plan. A plan is the roadmap. Like if you and I decided that like we're going to bail on this interview right now and go to Vegas, like we could get there, but we're going to probably take some wrong turns unless we have some sort of navigation or map. So first get yourself a map, because that's going to get you to your goal. And then be really honest with yourself with what that map looks like. Like the Konova program has me running 7 days a week, and it had me running 13 times per week. So 6 days a week were doubles and then one single.
Yeah.
And that's not realistic for most people. And we'll get back to what I'm doing now, which is nothing like that.
Okay.
But be honest with your time, because a lot of people see this program, it's like, all right, this is 5 days a week, but realistically, like with work and kids and just everything that's going on in our lives and everything is sort of topsy-turvy right now, you might not be able to actually do 5 days a week. So then they drop a day, and then you've just sort of spoiled the plan, because every workout is building off of the workout before. So be honest with your time as well. And then from there, I think it's just being consistent and kind of rolling with the punches. And that's not like an excuse to like bail on workouts when they get hard, but just know like what you ate yesterday at like, you know, the lunchroom at work, somebody brought in extra cookies, like that's going to affect your run tomorrow.
Right.
And you know, work stress or helping kids with homework, that's actually going to affect your run, whether it's positive or negative. Some of us are able to like run off some of that stress, but it's still stress on the body, and that's going to potentially negatively affect your athletic performance and your sleep.
Yeah, right. Yeah, get that sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that like that's part of the reason why I like the run, eat, sleep, repeat like message. I mean, because it sounds like just a thing that runners say. But then at the same time, if you dig a little deeper into these, I mean, each one, you need all of it.
Yes.
You need to run, you need to eat properly, you need to sleep and recover properly, and you definitely need consistency.
Yeah.
So, I just feel like that's why I wanted to dig in a little bit deeper. And then I know you said that you're not doing the same type of program that you were before. So, like, what does it look like now that? Because it sounded like what you were saying was the suggestion was you have your goals in mind, but then you have to take into account what type of athlete you are, where you're at, what your life looks like.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you're really heavy in with the kids, or work requires you to stand up a lot, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Where are you at now, and how has that evolved?
So I guess about a year and a half ago, I started training with a pro, and someday you'll probably have her on your show as well. And that opened my eyes, one, to really what training like a pro was. The running aspect didn't really change a whole lot from like my Konova days.
Yeah.
We weren't doing doubles, but what did change was like sleeping and eating and like all of the other stuff. Like I've never done yoga before. I wasn't really going to massage and taking care of like all of the other like modalities.
Right.
And so did that for a while, and we learned there's a pretty big age discrepancy between us, and my body, my hips have always been tight, and I ended up developing a hip issue. We were doing a lot of pretty fast workouts. I'm very proud of myself, finishing some of these. Like my last mile in the workout is getting down to like the mid 5:20s, and like doing some repeats on the track that like, we were very thankful for some really fast shoes.
Right.
But my hips were not able to have that extension that I needed. So after having some hip issues, but still like racing successfully, thankfully I have a business partner that knows me very well and was just pretty blunt and just said like first off, you're that athlete that a lot of people sort of half hate, because like you can just show up and like knock out these times with like no effort.
Right.
And just said like, you keep getting hurt. Why are you trying to run 100 plus miles per week? Like you can go run 30 miles per week and knock out at 2:49.
Right.
What happens if you run 50 miles a week and just stay healthy?
Right.
So my last 2 marathons have been essentially running a long run on Sunday, doing some 2-mile repeats on Wednesday, and then doing a sort of sub-tempo on Saturday. So
like from 7 days a week, like doubles, 6 days out of those weeks, to like maybe 4 days.
Yeah, maybe four. I'm trying to do about 4 days a week right now, and having like 5 would be maybe every couple weeks. I'll throw in a 5th day, but like that 4th and 5th are going to be fairly like chill. I should be able to talk the entire time.
Right.
And even our long runs, and then paces are all relative, but we're moving, and we'll get down to essentially race pace for those last like 10K. But we should still, the beauty about marathons is like you should still be able to talk in a marathon at race pace.
Right.
This isn't a 5K where you feel like you're going to crap yourself the entire time. So
yeah. Don't crap yourself.
Yeah, and also stay away from 5Ks. They are just brutal. Yeah, everybody who's like doing 5Ks, I applaud you.
Yeah, 5Ks are vicious.
They are.
Yeah, I mean, I like them because, on one hand, they're over quicker, hopefully.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, though, like, it's much different. I mean, and then I think that, I started running in, honestly, like in 2018, like hard, and yeah, I haven't had a 5K yet where I felt like I left it all out there, unfortunately, because I think there's a learning curve in all of this. Like you don't know until it's over whether you could have done more or not, because and then the longer the distance gets, the more iffy that can be. I mean, because then they say the race doesn't start till after 20 miles, and then so you don't know like how much more could I have given for the first 20? Yeah. Because then if you finish and you're kind of strong at the end, you're like, wow, I could have maybe done something, but you don't know.
Yeah.
So like, let's talk about like some tactics though. For when you're in a race, like when you like race morning and you toe the line, like what are you thinking about for like a race tactic within yourself? Like how are you going to treat this 26.2?
So, like a good example was just this last race. So this one was kind of unique. It was a 4-lap course, and so I picked a time, and initially I said I was going to finish like 2:45, 2:48, and so you should always start slow and build. Mm-hmm. If your first 5K or 10K is your fastest, like you've got problems because it's going to come back to bite you. So for that particular race, my plan was 6:40 average for the first lap, then 6:30, then 6:20, and then drop it down to 6. Mm-hmm. It didn't quite work out that way because somebody else was there and we kind of just ran and got settled in. Yeah. And so this is going to happen during races, that there's going to be an audible. I have that plan and I can keep telling myself I need to slow down, and I ended up telling Greg that like, hey, we're running faster than my goal, we need to slow down. The irony is, like, as we were at mile 10 and I told him I had to slow down, the response was, well, I can't finish the race at this pace anyways. So he ended up dropping after like 16 or 18 miles. But figure out what your race plan is, and there has to be some strategy to the course. For myself, I should be able to finish a lot of these races about the same time as the elite women. Mm-hmm. So kind of that 2:28, 2:34 area, and like Boston was a really good example because that's the first 5K are essentially downhill, and if you actually go and look at the splits, most years like the elite women are coming across that 5K mark around 17:30 to like it's even been like 19 minutes. But their last 5K is like 16:30, and so the downhill 5K is the slowest part of the race
because they're trying to hold back.
Just hold back, and knowing the topography of the course, it could be very advantageous. Because if you go out too hard, even though it's downhill, you are shooting yourself in the foot for later on.
Yeah, I think one of the things, because I talked to you a lot before my first marathon, which was the Free Press 2019, and one of the things that you mentioned, like race bands. Mm-hmm. So for those of you out there that don't know, race bands are it's based on the course, and it's like based on like historic data or whatever and elevation, and you can throw in there say I want to run a 3-hour flat marathon at an equal effort, like so an even effort, and then it'll show you. So each mile doesn't have to be the same, because a lot of people will go out, and if it's a hilly course, you'll think, like I need to keep this pace the whole time. Yeah. But then if you're like in the case for Free Press, mile 3 is pretty much half uphill because of the bridge. Yeah. And then mile like 13 or something like that. So you need to be aware of like the topography, and then make sure that you know that you don't need to hold whatever your goal pace is up a hill, because you've now spent that extra energy. I wouldn't say slow down too much, but
that's where like
off a little bit.
Experience. Yeah. And as much as I love like my Garmin on my wrist, like it's a tool not to tell me that I'm running like a 6:22 mile. It's a tool to feel how I feel the rhythm of my body, what's my breathing doing, How's my heart feel? For me, like visual as well. Like I can start to get a little like fuzzy if I start to like on the peripheral vision, like when I'm really pushing hard. Take all those feelings and then just associate it back with a number.
Right.
And so you can start to feel that effort, and then just maintain whatever your effort is supposed to be on those uphills and the downhills.
Yeah.
And so, learning how to just run by feel, even though we all have a computer on our wrist, and using that for some feedback.
Right, because you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to get stuck thinking like, oh my gosh,
I'm falling behind.
Gotta get back to 620.
Yeah, and then it's like 3 miles uphill on a 3% grade. Like, oh, it doesn't seem like much. I don't know. Have you run on Paint Creek Trail?
Yeah.
We've been doing our Sunday runs out there, and we'll typically start on the Rochester end and run towards Utica.
Yeah.
And so it's like a gradual, like 1% the whole way out. You don't really notice. You just sort of feel like, all right, today's maybe not my day. It takes a little bit more effort to like hold the conversation, and then you start turning back, and it's like, oh, that's why. Yeah. Like the 1% down.
Cause I run a lot with my my friends that we run 313, and on Saturdays, I mean they go to different places, but on Saturdays Sundays that's the Paint Creek Trail is one of the go-tos. Number one, because it's just beautiful. Yeah. And then also, I mean, you're putting in 30 to 60 miles a week or whatever. You need to try as much to get off of the concrete. So you don't even think though that you're going uphill. Like you're just going and you just feel like maybe I'm having a rough day or something. Yeah. And then next thing you know, you do that turnaround and you're like, this is great, we're good. But so for training purposes, like what do you call a long run? Like what for just the average person? Not a distance. Is it a distance thing, or are you saying like it's just the longest run of the training? So
for the average person, I guess it's relative to what you're training for. Yeah. For most people, if it's going to be, if you've got like a couple 5Ks or a couple 10Ks under your belt, your long run is probably going to be, I like numbers, so I would say it's going to be like 120% of your ultimate finish distance. For 5K, your long runs that are maybe a reduced effort, they might be 3.5 miles. I mean, they might be 4 miles. Right. For a half marathon, like I would typically still be over training. I might be running 15, 16 miles to train for a half marathon. Yeah. For the marathon, I won't typically go up to 26 miles. It's probably like 22. Would be ideal. Yeah. But the last 2 marathons, I think I did 19 was my longest for this race, and 18 was the longest for the one before that. Right. So it can be done with less. Yeah, because I've done the 3. I think I've done like 4 marathon segments. Okay. But only run 1 marathon. Okay. Because I was supposed to. The first one was for the free press, and then I was supposed to do Glass City, and then COVID, and then 3. And then the last one was going to be BQ2 in Grand Rapids. Okay. And that didn't happen because of the stress fracture. So, but I pretty much did at least more than maybe 60% of that training block. And none of my long runs were, I think my longest long run has been 16 miles. Okay. Pretty much. But with the Hansen's method, the volume is set up so where you're used to running on tired legs, and so by the time you cool down or whatever, or you taper, then you kind of walk into a race. And after 16 miles, I was like, okay, well, here we go. Yeah. And so in 16 miles on the free press, where is that at? Indian is that Indian Village? Yeah, it's probably right around Indian Village. Yeah, so like when 16 hit, I was like, well, let's see what happens after this, because like I had no reference of everything after 16 was all like a mystery to me. Yeah. But yeah, so I think people do. And what do you think, like for? I know you said 20% of the. What do you think it should be for your weekly volume though? Like, is there? You have a thought on that? Like, because you see sometimes people like especially like amateurs or whatever will say, they'll run maybe 2 miles here, 2 miles there. Or not much at all, and then they'll just throw down the long run of 10 miles or so. I mean, what do you think about that? I don't think that, like, I wouldn't throw out like a blanket number. I know like 20% is a number that gets thrown out a lot from like a lot of training plans, but you have to take like the individual, like what's your athletic ability, what's your like resiliency to injury, and then just what does your life look like? Because I mean, I've shown for myself personally, like through a lot of errors, that like I'm actually doing better on the long run being 50% of my weekly mileage.
Right.
You know, if I'm doing 2 mile repeats, I'm like maybe hitting 9 to 11 miles on that day.
Yeah.
And then on Saturday, it's just been sort of a chill 6 miles. So yeah, that's like 50% of my mileage is in the long run.
Yeah, but then you're looking at, you know, you're looking at it from, I mean, you've been running for quite some time, and you've tested, you know, pretty much every way that there is to kind of go to a marathon, you know. And I think
I've made all of the mistakes.
Well, I mean, because then the thing about like you said, your mistake is worked out for somebody else, you know. Because it just, you have to listen to your body and make sure that you're doing what's good for you.
Yes.
And then I guess you'd have to think like, how did it work out though? Because it may feel like it works for you, but if you had a goal of a certain time, you weren't able to get there because you hit a wall at whatever.
Yeah. Then you have to go back and kind of look at, you know, all right, here's what I did. What variables can I change?
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I think that's just in general, even like life advice right there. Yeah. Hey, this isn't working. What else can I change?
Yeah, don't keep doing the same thing over again. And so like the Hanson's method has just worked for me in kind of like my life too.
Yeah.
So I couldn't. I like the fact that, you know, like you're kind of running at a lower easy pace to kind of build that engine. Mm-hmm. And I do feel like it can be, if you don't trust it, like any program honestly, but if you don't trust it, it'll make you feel anxious because you're like, why am I not going as fast as I should?
Oh, totally.
But then, you know, like I guess there's all different types of, you know, methods out there, and I guess really the whole thing is just make sure you find out what works for you and what works for your body too. I mean, because a lot of us want to do something up here, you know, and you got to make sure that your body agrees with that, and just adapt it, because your first marathon or second or third aren't going to go the way you want them to normally.
Yeah, sometimes you get super lucky, and then for whatever reason, you have a day that like everything was perfect, the weather was perfect, your shoes were tied just right, and like it just failed. And sometimes it has nothing to do with training, sometimes it does, but anybody who is like kind of in this position where they're trying to figure out what should they do, I mean, I just recommend like take in information, take it in, and then figure out like how can you distill this down to what might work for you. And it could be a little bit of like, I'm going to take a piece of that because I think that makes sense, and I'm going to take a piece of that and just sort of put it together, you know, for that individual.
I mean, the good thing is you know, now we got, you know, Google, you know, there's so many different ways that you can figure out what works for other people. And then just do a little bit of research. I mean, YouTube is amazing for that. You know, like there's so many experts on YouTube. So
and now we got them on Instagram too.
Exactly. Here we go. But so just, you know, I think we talked about it earlier, and I wasn't able to run Glass City because of COVID, right? What's your advice to people, you know, that are really trying to stay motivated? You know, the races that they signed up for are now virtual. I guess it's a loaded question. What is your take on virtual races, and then also how do you and other people, you know, that you know, stay motivated during these times of running kind of alone?
So, I'm not really a fan of virtual races. Like, they don't have much of an appeal to me. But I'm also like the person who's qualified for Boston like a dozen times, or maybe more, but only ran it once, because for me it wasn't about like crossing the finish line. It's not about like the medal. I actually enjoy like the journey a lot more, because if you look at my workouts and a lot of my history, like I should be running 2:30s on a consistent basis, and I basically am like the poor test taker that's just sort of like, you know, dropping a D on every test I've taken. So I actually enjoy the build up, I think, a lot more than race day up until the last couple years. Like not sleeping for 2 days before the race, and honestly like being kind of quick, and having like even done well at a couple races or won a couple races, like going back the next year, like there's a lot of pressure, like, you know, about, hey, are you gonna win it this year, or what's the new course record? And so I think I really prefer like the training aspect, like just going out and like hammering like 19 miles like with the ladies, and like we get to like talk, and it's like cool. That's 2 hours of my day, and I feel like finally feel those like runner's high that people talk about. So yeah, like that's kind of brings me back into like the second, like how do you stay motivated? When COVID hit, it hit us hard here in the shop. Like it hit every small business hard, but we weren't sure like financially like what things were going to look like. So my business partner, I, and one of our key staff ended up sort of taking on like, you know, basically all the roles here, and everybody else was at home, and spent a ton of time in the car, like making deliveries 3 hours a day. So I lost all motivation because I was supposed to race like a week before you. I was supposed to do Rotterdam. And that was canceled. And I didn't really train for like the last 3 weeks leading up to that, just trying to manage like a small business. And then I kind of went through like a lot of lack of motivation. I'd set out one day and it's 8 miles from my door, a lap around Belle Isle and back. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to do 12 today. And 6 miles in, I was like, no, I'm done. Like throw down a walk break and then like have my pity party as I ran home. And for me personally, it was a lot about getting back out there and just running with people. I was struggling to finish 8 mile runs, and then solo. And then finally ran with the girls, and we ran out Paint Creek Trail, and I was struggling to finish like my 8 miles at like a 7:20 pace. And then we go out to Paint Creek and we run like 6:40s for 16 miles, and we talked the entire time. And I got back and I was like, well, it's not physical. Like there's nothing wrong with the machine. It's just sort of all in my head.
I mean, I think in the beginning of the pandemic, I mean, everything shut down. Like
this was like August.
But I mean, like, all the races. I mean, all the groups stopped. You know, pretty much, and you really had to, to me, you kind of had to already be in like a training segment to kind of keep you going, because if it's just like all of a sudden you're going to, because a lot of the people in this area they run with RUNdetroit on Saturdays, we run 3 on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they run with the other groups on Mondays. You know what I'm saying? So, and then all that stopped.
I didn't realize how important like those connections, even though it's like it's 45 minutes and I don't stick around for the beer afterwards. Like I didn't realize how much I missed that.
It means a lot. Like, cause even if you're not running with people, because a lot of people watching probably train by themselves often, but it's a choice at that point. Like before the pandemic, if I ran around my neighborhood, it's just because it was convenient to me, not because I had no other choice. You know, like, so it was pretty tough, and I was glad that groups started figuring it out, and then you guys opened back up to run on Saturdays, and people kind of really needed that group, and people spread out in their social distance and all that stuff. But just even if somebody's 6 feet away from you and they're going through the same pain as you, that's what it's all about.
When like we've had some talks on Saturday, we've had some talks on Saturday too, which has been nice. To like actually go out and run with some other people, and like very rarely do we seem to ever talk about like the running stuff. It's actually talking about the life thing and like kind of just balancing. And the pandemic, I think, has like got some of us talking more about like, hey, I'm having the struggle. How do I balance like this situation at home? But I think like I've enjoyed the running groups for everything else. Like before we talk about cars or home remodeling or anything else other than running, and that connection was missed sorely.
I was very happy when groups start open back up, and you see people that come out, and people maybe even starting to run for the first time, because the pandemic did drive some people outside too. Even though it was by themselves, they got outside, and perfect timing, the group started opening back up. So a lot of people are probably seeing, a lot of groups are seeing some newcomers that are just new to running, and so that kind of segues me to this wall here, right? So new runners, like what is when somebody comes in the store and they're like, hey, I just started running recently, what is your like advice for shopping for shoes, like looking for a shoe that works?
So I guess my first tip of advice is for all of the seasoned runners out there that are typically fielding that question from their like coworkers, running friends, neighbor. Stop recommending a brand. It's like you say, I want a car, and I say, go get a Ford. And I got this like awesome like Mustang in my head, and you show up with a Fiesta, like a little disconnect.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of people that like are just picking up shoes because somebody else just said go get this.
Yeah.
What I recommend for anybody is like definitely go to a run shop, wherever your local shop is, whatever state or city you're in, and go get fit, because it's not just about like finding the right shoe, but it's actually finding like this. You get to have a little conversation, even if it's only 30 minutes during your fitting, but it'll build a little connection. And there's like resources like at your local run shop. But for us, you come in, our ultimate goal is just to keep you feeling comfortable and make it as easy as possible. And I'd like to joke a lot, and I'll tell people like, you're gonna have a crappy run. But when you do, I want you to blame it on your coworkers or your kids, because it should not have anything to do with your shoes. Our fit process here is actually quite different than like industry standards. When I got fit for my very first pair of running shoes, I was a new runner, and so I got fit into what's typically called a stability shoe. We actually call them just what they are. They're corrective shoes. So they're shoes that have like a wedge of hard foam on the inside edge. I also got put green Superfeed inside, which actually adds on top of the like corrective component, and it's basically just a bunch of BS, and it's typically just an upsell tactic.
Right.
And so we're not very big on corrective shoes. Very few people need them. A lot of people think like a corrective shoe has something to do with arch height. It has nothing to do with arch height. It's actually designed like in a biomechanics lab around foot and ankle motion. And if you have a completely flat foot, you can have a flat foot that's rigid, that doesn't really move, or rigid, that's hyper flexible, and they function completely different. So you also notice like anytime you come in, we don't have any of the foot scanning machines, because they just tell you how your foot is shaped. They don't actually tell you how your foot moves.
Yeah.
So go in, try on shoes, and ultimately the shoe should feel as smooth and as natural as possible. That's what we'll keep telling people here. What we want to hear, without like mentioning this to a customer or a new runner, is when they say something like, well, this one doesn't feel like I have a shoe on my foot. That's probably your shoe right there.
Right.
It's not what most people think they're supposed to get, because they feel like, oh, the shoe's supposed to push me forward, or supposed to support my arch.
Yeah.
The shoe that is forgettable is going to allow you to move in your natural paths, and you probably won't. You're going to lessen your risk of dealing with issues like I had. My tibia and fibula couldn't rotate because I had a wedge under the medial side plus an arch support on top, and it limited motion. Also, jumping into 80-mile weeks doesn't help.
Yeah.
But there's quite a few things going on there. So if you're going to go a place, you don't need fancy treadmills. We also don't have a treadmill in our shop, because we'll typically just send people outside and have them run down the street. I can actually get a much better visual of how somebody runs by sending them down the sidewalk. If anybody's filming you from the knee down, they're taking out a big equation, and I see a lot of upper body motions that actually affect the lower body.
Yeah.
So go to your local run shop, build a connection. If it's not necessarily the right run shop for you, you probably have more than one in your neighborhood. So next time, go to the next run shop and just sort of feel them out. Like, everybody has their favorite grocery store they go to.
Yeah.
So, sometimes if you're in a bind, you got to go to that one.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you'll drive a little bit farther to go to the shop that, sort of connects with you.
Right. Because I think when I first came in here, I mean, I had, my set shoe, selection that I had, and it was, based on, it was working, and I think I came in here one day and you suggested, I believe it was the Skechers the Razor 3s. And I would have never, online just like randomly went to Skechers' site and said, I want to grab some running shoes, and then you said, hey, just try them, I'll go outside. And then as soon as I stepped out there and started running, I'm like, okay, this is the shoe. Yeah. And it turned out that like it was I think the first run, it was just so much different than the other shoes that I had. It was a little tough, like the first run, and the first two actually. And then as soon as they kind of got used to my foot, or I got used to the shoe, it's my favorite shoe now. So now I have like two pairs of the same shoe. So I definitely would suggest, going to talk to somebody that does this. And I think there's a lot of people that I've sent people to RUNdetroit or here to shop, and one of the things that they said was that they didn't feel like they were being like sold a shoe. Like if they walked back out with nothing, or when ordered online, they didn't feel like, yo, no, you need this shoe, you know.
Yeah.
So go, I would say go somewhere that makes you feel like you're learning something in the process about yourself and shoes, and then you can make an educated decision based on like what you now know and not what you were now like told, you know, like that this is the best thing for you.
Yeah, and so like I tell people all the time, our number 1 and number 2 selling brands, and there's a pretty big gap to number 3. Their number 1 and number 2 are flip-flopping often, and for what's our current number 2 brand, I don't own a single pair. I would typically say I have well over 100 running shoes in my like shoe closet. I just thinned out, so I think I'm down to like 65 pairs right now.
Okay.
But not a single pair comes from our number 2 brand. Okay. They just don't feel right. They did like 10 years ago. I had like almost all my shoes for that with that brand, but they haven't changed much. But I have, and like they just don't work.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing. Like go figure out what works for you, because what is like potentially the most popular may not work. And then if you do, you know, go through a fitting. Even if you leave without the shoe, don't buy it online, or at least buy it online from the shop you got. You know, it's something that like every small like run shop deals with, and there's actually a thread going in one of the local Facebook pages right now, and people are, you know, somebody asked, what shoe do I buy? Yeah. And you get a lot of things like people are recommending their favorite brand, or they're recommending a model, and like they're all over the board with the recommendations. And you'll see somebody that says, you know, hey, go get fit your run shop and then find that shoe online. Well, the brand set the price. Yeah. So that's why there's no sales pressure in our business model, because like this particular shoe is going to be $160 anywhere and everywhere you go. Like you can't buy it for less. You know, they know there's a value. And so if you're going to spend your dollars, just like keep it in your community, wherever, you know, if you're in Austin watching, or if you're in Dallas, like wherever, just shop local, because if, you know, you want to keep going back and trying on shoes, that shop has to still be there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. If you want to go running down the sidewalk every now and then, you make sure that you keep the store rolling. So I think that I've kind of fallen into that too. Like, you know, somebody says, oh, what kind of shoe? What shoe should I get? And normally I try my best to, even if I have a favorite shoe, I'll tell them like all the shoes that I have, and for whatever reason, I like them.
Yeah, and that's like just call out the traits. I like this shoe because of this.
Yeah, instead of just saying like, I mean, because if you just say your favorite shoe, I mean, it's your favorite shoe, you know, for a reason. And that other person, unless they're running exactly like you and has same stride, same strike, all that, then, you know, then it may not be the one, you know.
Yeah, and then there's updates too. You know, there's, you know, shoes where somebody, you know, may be running in, you know, the Ghost, and then next year there's a slight update and it just doesn't fit the same.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you go in your shop, you're like, hey, I try on the new Ghost and it doesn't feel quite how I thought it was going to feel. Yeah. And we'll ask very pointed questions, and like based off of what you feel, well then try this or try that, because these two are going to solve that problem. How many shoes do you typically have in your rotation?
Like I think I have like maybe four, maybe 3 or 4 in the rotation.
Nice.
And then I just like as I kind of wear through them, I start looking, okay, what's the next one? And then I hadn't really been like, I'm still somewhat new to the whole thing, so I haven't, you know, so I'm still trying new things, you know, like, so the next shoe is probably gonna be a total different brand than I've ever even had before, just because I want to see what's out there, you know, because I think just tying yourself to one brand as if we're like sponsored is kind of crazy, you know. Like
once you have a sponsorship deal, then you're gonna wear whatever, at least on Instagram, wear whatever they're gonna pay you to wear.
So Nike, if you want to pay me, we're here. You know, I got it.
But like, Nike on Instagram, Razors on the road.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. But you know, so like it's I definitely want to keep adding to that, and I'm definitely open to like just say, you know, if somebody says, hey, suggest this shoe because of whatever reason, and I test it out and I like it, then I'll go with it. You know, and it would be cool to have, you know, a bunch of different brands, and so you really get a feel for like as you go through this training program. Because the good thing about it, if you're all, you know, rested, and then you come to a store and you try some shoes, everything feels great, you know. But then like once you're into the middle of a marathon like training segment, there's a shoe that's gonna be like, no, because I have one that I loved in the beginning of this last training block, and by the middle of them, I'm like, no, it's not working. I mean, because you run different when you're tired.
Yeah, that fatigue builds up. Yeah.
So so I definitely I would suggest, if you're in this area, I would definitely suggest, there's other stores as well, but I definitely would come down here because it just works out, and you guys are great to people when they come in. And then on Saturday mornings, if you want to run, come and run.
Yeah, we run every Saturday at 8 a.m. Sharp. Feel free to join us. And then also keep an eye on your local run shops. Now that things are starting to, I wouldn't even say open back up, but we're learning how to do business in a different environment. Demo runs are going to start to happen again. So that's where a brand will come in with a whole size run of shoes. They may have multiple models, and you can actually take a pair and go run 3 miles or go run 6 miles. So it's basically like an extended test drive for cars. Yeah. So we've got a couple brands I'm going to do some demo runs with shortly, as long as we can continue to do this safely. People are showing up with their masks. We keep things spread out. So we're going to have a trail event coming up.
Oh, sweet.
That way people are dispersing on different trails from the get-go. So that's a great way to test product out without any sort of commitment to actually buy.
So to end this off, I want to ask some more fun questions.
All right.
We'll start with the short one. Music or no music when you run?
Most of the time I would say no music, but I have been running with music lately. I had a training run we were supposed to do, and last minute my partner wasn't able to show up. I was a little pity party because it was going to be a 20-miler-ish, and so I threw on some headphones, and again, kind of knowing I can do 6 miles.
Yeah.
I ended up doing 16. I did 19 at a 6:35, and I was just singing along the whole time with music, and I ended up racing last weekend with music because it was just I'm just going to zone out, and I'm also a creature of habit, so I listen to essentially the same playlist every time.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Dude.
I want to know. I don't want to have to think about it. I just want to know the words.
Yeah.
And not.
Yeah, that's one thing. I always trained with music, and then I ran in Atlanta with no music. I just said I'm just gonna try it out. And I loved it though. Yeah. I loved because it seemed like the time went by quicker.
I wouldn't want to race.
There's no reference to a song's being over or not.
Yeah.
So I just didn't know anything. I was just running. And it worked out. So I'm gonna try this next segment that I get back into. I'm gonna try doing most of it with no music and see what happens. I'll let you know if I go crazy.
All right. I would love for a race like Atlanta. I would do it without music. This race was so small. There was 8 of us. And I needed something.
Yeah.
But otherwise, slight digression for Indy last year, because I didn't have headphones on or anything. I was able to assemble a group of people around me around mile 1 once the race sorted out. And being a former cyclist, knowing about pace lines and working, we had a group of about 6 of us, and we ran 2 by 2. And you took 2 minutes in the front, and then you moved to the back.
Oh, geez, you got a machine out there.
Yeah, and so we were able to pretty much maintain 12 to 18 seconds per mile faster than goal because we were sharing the workload.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And we ended up having about a dozen that working together at our highest peak. So having the music off and be able to talk to your neighbors.
And then in the big races, I mean, it's you try your best to enjoy the moment, especially when this opens back up and there's races again.
Yeah.
Then just take those headphones off, or maybe take them with you or something.
Yeah,
just in case.
Drop them down.
But I definitely liked the hearing, the cowbells and all that stuff. I mean, it worked out for me, and I think that I think I missed a lot in the other races that I did have headphones.
Yeah.
On. But for the free press, though, it worked out for me because I was by myself, essentially from 16.
The back half gets a little lonely.
16 to the rest of the way. I mean, one lady was with me the whole, for a little bit, but then she ended up, falling off a bit. But next question, I'll tell you my story first.
All right.
What's the weirdest thing or funniest thing that's happened to you in a race? And I'll give you my story. It was the Detroit Free Press, and I think it was mile maybe 12 or something. And there was a lady in front of me just cruising along, and I was right behind her for a while. And she did something, maybe she was breathing hard or something. And she did a clear the throat. And this weird thing came and hit me on my kneecap. It was like a loogie or something, right? And it sat there. I mean, because you can't look down when you're running or whatever. So it just sat there the whole time. And I could just That's my. It was disgusting. I wanted to say something to her. I wanted to find her after and say, like, what are you doing? You know, but that's the weirdest and funniest thing that's happened to me. It was a loogie on my knee.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's gross.
Yeah. So I know you've got a lot of races. What's one of the craziest things that's happened to you?
One that stands out is there was one particular race, and I think there was 3 of us up front, and we were working together, and the police car is in front of us. So we're following the police car, and you just sort of zone out. If there is a police car in front of you, I don't really need to pay attention to what's going on. I just follow the car. And at some point, the car slowed down a bit and like waved us like up, and we were like running next to it, and he asked why we were still following him.
Oh no.
And he's like, you guys are supposed to turn back there.
What?
And like my response was, why are you still driving like 11 miles per hour? And yeah, so he like his job was done. Apparently we were supposed to turn, and some other car was there waiting for us.
He didn't like signal, nothing.
No.
Oh, maybe
if he like sped off, I guess we may be wondering what was going on. But he just kept driving, race pace.
That dude was.
Yeah. So we were like all scratching our heads. That was probably the weirdest thing.
So did you guys just turn around and keep going? Or what?
Yeah, we had to turn around and get back on course and keep running.
All right. Well, geez. But no, I really appreciate it, man. Where can they find you on Instagram?
The shop is RUN_Detroit.
Okay.
We're on Facebook as well. We're here in Detroit. We are about to celebrate 8 years, first running store ever in the city of Detroit, which is like mind-boggling.
Oh wow, yeah. Kind of crazy.
So yeah, we're here. Come in and say hi. And then even if you have questions, like, you know, we're a business. We certainly appreciate when people like actually buy something. But if you have questions, like reach out. That's what we're here for. We want to make sure you're starting off on the right foot, or, you know, if you're trying to take it to the next level, like let's get you there and let's take in some information to make sure you've got some data that's going to work for you.
Cool. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you doing this. I was gonna say I appreciate you being here, but it's your store, so
I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate you having me. But thanks so much for being here. Thanks for tuning in. On Wednesday we have Coach Asia Rawls. She's gonna be talking about the eat portion of this whole thing, and she is vegan, but I know that she has a little bit of wiggle room though too to talk about some other things about how diet and health play a role in us being the best athletes possible. So please tune in on Wednesday. I think it's going to be at 7:30-ish, but we'll give you an update on the time. And that's all for the day. Thank you so much. Run, eat, sleep, and repeat.
Thanks, everybody.
And I wish I had a button to turn it off, but I don't. Now I got to get
You can stay there. I'll hit the button.